What happens when a little girl's innocent question forces a billionaire to confront the heartbreaking truth he's hidden for years? Elliot Grayson is a name everyone knows. A self-made billionaire, he's built his fortune from nothing, crafting a legacy as one of the most successful real estate tycoons in the world. Yet, behind the towering walls of his opulent estate, Elliot's life is anything but enviable. His days are consumed by work, his nights by silence, and his heart by a grief he refuses to acknowledge. In his private study, a single weathered photograph sits locked away. His late sister Claire, smiling beside him in happier times. It's a moment frozen in time, now overshadowed by guilt and loneliness. Miles away, Clara Dawson navigates a very different reality. A single mother in her early 30s, Clara works tirelessly to raise her spirited 7-year-old daughter, Rosie. Between shifts as a waitress and cleaning apartments, Clara dreams of giving Rosie a brighter future, one far from the struggles that have defined her own life. When Clara is unexpectedly offered a position as a housekeeper at the Grayson estate, she accepts with hesitation. To her, it's not just a job, it's a lifeline. Unbeknownst to her, it's also the start of a journey that will change not just her life but Elliot's as well. Clara's first day at the estate is nothing short of overwhelming. The mansion looms like a castle, with polished marble floors and sprawling hallways that seem endless. For someone accustomed to cramped apartments, it's a world that feels both enchanting and intimidating. Upon arrival, she's greeted by Mr. Bennett, the estate manager, whose demeanor is as stern as his perfectly pressed suit. "Follow the rules," he says curtly. Mr. Grayson values his privacy above all else. Do your job, avoid unnecessary questions, and never venture into the West Wing. Meanwhile, Elliot barely acknowledges Clara's presence. He passes her in the hallway with a distant nod, his expression cold and unreadable. It's clear to Clara that Elliot is a man who has built walls around himself, both literal and emotional. Still, Clara presses on, driven by her determination to create a better life for Rosie. Back home, Rosie is brimming with curiosity about her mother's new job. "Is the mansion like a palace, Mom? Is the owner a king?" she asks, her eyes wide with wonder. Clara laughs but can't shake the feeling that Rosie's curiosity will one day lead to an encounter that will unravel secrets neither of them could have imagined. Despite the rigid rules of the estate, Clara begins to notice the subtle cracks in Elliot Grayson's carefully curated world. The sprawling mansion is immaculate but eerily lifeless, with no personal touches, save for the occasional antique or abstract painting. The staff moves like ghosts, rarely speaking and always avoiding the West Wing. Clara wonders why a man so wealthy and powerful would choose to live in such isolation. One day, as she's dusting the bookshelves in the library, Clara's eyes fall on a peculiar item, a leather-bound photo album hidden behind rows of thick, untouched books. She hesitates but leaves it untouched, heeding Mr. Bennett's warnings. However, the faintest glimpse of a photograph catches her attention. A much younger Elliot, smiling alongside a young woman. The joy in his expression is so different from the stern, closed-off man she has come to know. Back home, Rosie's questions persist. "Did you meet Mr. Grayson today? What's he like?" Clara tries to keep her answers vague, unsure how to describe a man who seems more like a shadow than a person. Still, Rosie's unbridled enthusiasm lifts Clara's spirits, reminding her why she endures the long hours and uncertainty of this new job. Days pass, and Clara begins to notice small but telling details about Elliot's routine. He spends hours in his study, the door always closed. He avoids the staff, choosing to eat his meals alone. Once, she catches him staring out a window at the sprawling garden, a look of profound sadness etched across his face. It's as if he's searching for something, or someone, lost to him long ago. Rosie, ever the curious child, can't resist the allure of her mother's mysterious new workplace. On an afternoon when Clara takes her to the estate to pick up some forgotten paperwork, Rosie's eyes widen at the sheer grandeur of the mansion. "This place is huge," she whispers in awe, clutching her mother's hand tightly. As Clara hastily finishes her task, Rosie spots Elliot for the first time. He's standing in the distance, his figure silhouetted against the golden light streaming through the windows. Intrigued, Rosie tugs on her mother's sleeve. "Is that Mr. Grayson?" she asks, her voice soft. Before Clara can stop her, Rosie calls out, "Hi, mister." Elliot freezes, momentarily caught off guard. He turns to face Rosie, his expression unreadable. That innocent greeting marks the beginning of a connection that will unravel truths long buried. As days go by, Rosie's fascination with Elliot Grayson deepens. The billionaire who once seemed like a distant figure now appears as a man caught between his own solitude and the strange warmth he feels around the little girl. It's an uncomfortable feeling for Elliot, one that he tries to ignore. Yet, when Rosie starts to leave small drawings of the mansion and a smiley face on the kitchen counter, his heart begins to soften in ways he hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, Clara senses a shift in her own relationship with Elliot. Though he remains distant and enigmatic, his interactions with her seem less harsh. He no longer avoids her when they cross paths in the halls, and there are even moments when his eyes linger on her with something resembling curiosity, yet Clara can't help but notice the weariness beneath his cold exterior. One afternoon, while Clara is tidying up the library, she finds herself face to face with the photograph she had seen before, the one of a younger Elliot and a smiling woman. This time she picks it up, her fingers grazing the edges. As she holds the photo, something stirs within her. A sense of recognition, of understanding that the mansion, the man, and the sadness are all part of a much larger story she doesn't yet know. Clara's curiosity grows, but she is cautious. She knows better than to delve into the private affairs of her employer, but the urge to understand the man who once seemed untouchable is undeniable. One evening, as she's dusting near the mansion's grand piano, she overhears a conversation between Elliot and Ms. Harper, his longtime housekeeper. From what Clara can gather, the subject of their discussion is Claire, Elliot's sister. "She would have been so proud of you," Ms. Harper says softly. "I don't think she'd recognize me anymore," Elliot replies, his voice tight with emotion. Clara freezes, unsure whether to stay or leave. She quietly retreats, her heart racing. She knows little about the man beyond what she's observed, but she now feels a deeper connection to his sorrow. The mention of a lost loved one resonates with Clara in ways she doesn't fully understand, but she recognizes a shared pain, a grief she knows all too well. Meanwhile, Rosie's unrelenting energy continues to bring moments of levity into Elliot's dark world. One afternoon, she convinces him to take her on a tour of the garden, and for the first time, Elliot willingly engages with her. The sight of him laughing, even if briefly, is a rare one. As weeks pass, the bond between Rosie and Elliot grows stronger. What began as a small, hesitant connection has blossomed into something deeper, something Elliot can't easily ignore. The playful innocence that Rosie brings with her every day is like a light in the darkness, gradually eroding the walls he's so carefully constructed around himself. Clara watches from the sidelines, feeling both proud and confused. She never anticipated that her daughter's curiosity would be the key to unlocking Elliot's guarded heart. One morning, after Elliot finds a drawing of the mansion that Rosie made, he stands in front of the kitchen counter for several long moments, staring at the simple picture. It's a crude drawing, just a rectangle with a few jagged lines representing windows and a sun with a smiley face. But something about it tugs at Elliot. Perhaps it's the smiley face, or the carefree nature of the drawing, but it's the first time in years that he feels an unexplainable warmth. As Clara observes Elliot from a distance, she starts to question her own preconceived notions about him. The man she once thought was cold and unapproachable is beginning to reveal cracks in his stoic exterior. But she can't yet tell if it's out of genuine kindness or some other, more complex reason. One afternoon, Clara stumbles upon a journal while cleaning the estate's library. It's bound in black leather and looks old, tucked into a shelf filled with dusty volumes. She hesitates, knowing she shouldn't pry, but something about the journal calls to her. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she opens it. Inside, she finds a series of entries, written by none other than Elliot Grayson himself. The words are raw, filled with regret and pain. He writes about his sister Claire, about the accident that shattered their family, and about his deep guilt over their fractured relationship. The last entry, dated several years ago, reads, "I thought keeping everyone at arm's length would help me forget. But the truth is, it only makes me more alone." Clara's heart tightens as she reads these words. She sees the pain behind the aloofness, the grief behind the coldness. Elliot's loneliness is not born of arrogance or indifference, but of a wound that's never healed. She suddenly realizes that she's been judging him through the lens of her own experiences, not knowing the depths of his loss. Meanwhile, Rosie's friendship with Elliot continues to blossom. She now spends most afternoons with him, showing him more of her childlike wonder. They talk about everything, from the best ice cream flavors to the secret tunnels she imagines under the mansion. With each passing day, Elliot becomes less the distant billionaire and more the man who is slowly learning to live again. As the weeks go by, Clara can't ignore the growing connection between Rosie and Elliot. She's noticed how much more relaxed Elliot has become around her daughter, how his cold demeanor softens when Rosie is near. What's even more surprising is how much the billionaire has started to open up to Clara in small ways. They share fleeting conversations in the hallways, exchanging polite pleasantries that slowly evolve into longer discussions. One evening, while Clara is cleaning the grand staircase, Elliot unexpectedly joins her. "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be cleaning stairs with a housekeeper," he says with a faint smile. Clara chuckles softly. "You'd be surprised how many high-powered people I've met who never touch a mop," she replies. It's a light-hearted moment, but it's a rare glimpse into Elliot's vulnerability. For the first time, Clara senses that he may not be the rigid, isolated man she once thought him to be. There's something more behind his eyes, something painful he's reluctant to share. But Clara's sense of empathy drives her to want to know more, to understand him better. She can't help but wonder if the man who seems so distant on the outside is hiding a story that might resonate with her own struggles. Elliot's gradual transformation is not lost on the staff. Ms. Harper, his longtime housekeeper, watches with quiet approval as the man who once cloaked himself in indifference begins to show a softer side. One day when Clara is cleaning the study, Ms. Harper quietly approaches her. "You've made quite an impression on Mr. Grayson," she observes with a knowing smile. Clara is taken aback. "I don't understand. He hardly speaks to me." Ms. Harper shakes her head. "It's not the words, dear. It's the way he looks at you. Like he sees something he's been missing for a long time. And I think he's finally ready to confront it." Clara doesn't know how to respond to this. She's used to keeping her distance from her employer, but the idea that Elliot might be opening up to her on some level both excites and unnerves her. She's never been one to seek validation from the wealthy, but something about the way Elliot carries his grief calls out to her. She sees herself in him, someone who's learned to bury their pain under layers of responsibility and duty, but Clara knows that the emotional distance Elliot has created is a fortress, one that may take more than kindness or patience to break down. She doesn't know if she's ready for what lies ahead, but she's beginning to wonder if the man she's getting to know is someone she might not want to walk away from. The turning point comes when a tragedy strikes unexpectedly, changing the course of everything. It's an ordinary afternoon, and Clara has brought Rosie to the estate again. Elliot, who has been more open and engaged recently, decides to take her for a walk through the expansive gardens, something he's never done before. The crisp air feels different today, and for once it seems like Elliot is truly enjoying the moment, smiling and laughing with Rosie. But then, disaster strikes. While running through the garden, Rosie trips and falls, hitting her head hard on the stone pathway. Clara's heart skips a beat as she rushes toward her daughter, who's unconscious and bleeding. Elliot freezes in panic as Clara cradles Rosie in her arms, her voice trembling as she calls for help. The mansion's staff mobilizes quickly, but it's Elliot who steps forward first, his calm demeanor suddenly replaced with frantic energy. He orders the driver to take them to the nearest hospital and insists on accompanying them, never leaving Clara's side. In the car, his usual coldness disappears. His concern for Rosie is palpable, and Clara realizes for the first time that beneath all his wealth and power, Elliot is a man who, when it matters, is capable of great tenderness. At the hospital, Clara can barely breathe as Rosie undergoes tests. Elliot stands by her, though he says little. His mind races with guilt, wondering if the sudden, unexpected warmth he's started to feel for Rosie has made him reckless. When Rosie finally stirs, her eyes flutter open, and Clara can't hold back her relief. "Mom?" Rosie whispers weakly. Clara hugs her tightly, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're here, sweetheart. You're going to be fine." Elliot, who's been standing in the corner, watches the scene with a mix of emotions. The fear in his chest is evident, but as he watches Clara care for Rosie, something inside him snaps. The walls he's built over the years begin to crumble. His pain, his regrets, everything he's buried deep within him, he realizes it's all been keeping him from living a full life. As Clara turns to thank him, her voice quivering, she sees something in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable. "I owe you everything," she says quietly, her gratitude overwhelming. For the first time, Elliot doesn't look away. He finally speaks what's been buried deep inside him for years. In the sterile hospital room, with the beeping of monitors filling the silence, Elliot finally opens up to Clara. His voice is low, barely audible, but his words carry the weight of years of grief. "I never thought I could love again after losing Claire," Elliot admits, his gaze focused on the floor. "I built this entire life around not needing anyone, thinking I was better off alone." He pauses, as though struggling to admit something even deeper. "But when I saw Rosie, when I saw the way you cared for her, I realized how wrong I was." Clara is taken aback, unsure how to respond. She had always seen Elliot as distant, a man who preferred his own company. But now she sees him as a man haunted by the loss of someone he loved deeply. The quiet vulnerability in his voice touches something inside Clara. She too has known the depths of loss and the walls it can build around a person. Elliot's words continue to echo in the room, and Clara, still in disbelief at the man standing before her, slowly responds, "You're not alone, Elliot. You never have been." Her voice is firm, but gentle, as if offering him the understanding he's spent so long searching for. Elliot's revelation shatters the emotional walls he has so carefully constructed. He looks at Clara, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and guilt. He's not the man he once was, and though the pain of losing Claire still lingers, it's in this moment, standing before Clara, that he understands something crucial. He's been hiding from life, from love, from everything that matters. "I've been a fool," Elliot says, his voice thick with emotion. "I've pushed people away because I was too scared to face what I've lost. But meeting you and Rosie, you've made me see how much I've missed out on." Clara's eyes soften as she looks at him. "No one is perfect. We all have our struggles, our fears. But it's never too late to change, Elliot." She pauses, her gaze lingering on him. "You're not as alone as you think." At that moment, Rosie, still recovering from her fall, stirs and looks up at the two of them. Her eyes, full of innocence, seem to ask a question without words. Elliot's heart swells, and for the first time in years he feels a flicker of hope. He's not entirely sure what the future holds, but he knows one thing for certain. He no longer has to face it alone. In the days following Rosie's accident, a quiet transformation takes place. Elliot becomes a more present figure in the mansion, his cold, distant aura replaced with warmth. He spends time with Rosie each day, helping her recover physically and emotionally. What started as a sense of duty to make sure she was okay soon turns into a genuine bond between them. He plays board games with her, reads her favorite books, and listens to her dreams of becoming an artist. For Clara, watching this change is both comforting and bittersweet. She never imagined that the same man who once seemed so unreachable would now be the one spending hours each day with her daughter. She sees the cracks in his facade, and it's clear that he's grappling with something deeper. One afternoon, while Clara is cleaning the study, she sees Elliot standing by the window, looking out at the gardens. His expression is distant, but there's a quiet sadness in his eyes. She walks up to him, unsure if she should interrupt. But Elliot turns, his gaze softening as he notices her approach. "Thank you," he says simply, his voice laced with vulnerability. "For giving me a chance to change, to be better." Clara smiles warmly at him, her heart swelling with compassion. She never expected this from Elliot, a man who seemed so locked in his own grief, so shut off from the world. But she sees it now, the humanity that lies beneath the layers of pain he's been carrying. "I didn't give you a chance, Elliot," she responds, her tone gentle but firm. "You gave yourself that chance." As the days pass, things settle into a new rhythm. Clara and Elliot continue to share fleeting conversations, ones that grow more meaningful as time goes on. Their connection, though subtle, is undeniable. They begin to understand each other in ways they never could have before. Two people brought together by their shared grief, but also by the healing power of love and companionship. Meanwhile, Rosie's recovery is swift, and she's back to her usual self, filling the mansion with her laughter and bright energy. The house, which once felt cold and empty, now feels alive with possibility. For the first time in years, Elliot looks forward to the future, something he never thought would happen again. As the days turn into weeks, Elliot begins to make decisions that reflect his newfound outlook on life. One morning, he surprises Clara by walking into the kitchen with a large envelope in hand. "I've been thinking," Elliot begins, handing the envelope to Clara. "I want to make sure Rosie has the opportunities I never had, and that no child should miss out on their future." Clara, puzzled but intrigued, opens the envelope to reveal a scholarship offer for Rosie to attend an esteemed art academy. It's a generous gesture, but it's also a significant step for Elliot, a man who, just a few months ago, was emotionally distant and disconnected from the world around him. You did this for her?" Clara asks, her voice barely a whisper. Elliot nods, his gaze soft. "For her, yes. But also for me. I've spent so much of my life focused on what I've lost that I forgot to look at what I still have." His words are simple, yet powerful. In that moment, Clara realizes how much Elliot has changed, not just for Rosie, but for himself. He's finally confronting his past, allowing himself to open up to the possibilities of the future. With Rosie's scholarship secured, Elliot begins to take further steps to make amends with the people he once kept at arm's length. He reconnects with his old mentor, Ms. Grace, and begins to involve himself in various charitable causes, something he had avoided for years. The transformation is gradual, but it's undeniable. He's no longer the man who hides behind the walls of his mansion, but someone who actively engages with the world around him. One evening, as Clara and Rosie are leaving the estate after another day of cleaning, Clara can't help but feel a sense of fulfillment she hasn't experienced in years. Rosie's laughter echoes from inside the mansion, where Elliot has just finished teaching her how to play chess. It's a simple moment, but it symbolizes everything that has changed. As Clara looks back at the mansion, she sees Elliot standing in the doorway, watching them with a content smile. For the first time, she doesn't see the lonely, grief-stricken man who had once isolated himself. Instead, she sees a man who has found his way back to the people he truly cares about, and she knows that whatever the future holds, they'll face it together. Months pass, and the changes in Elliot's life become even more evident. The mansion, once quiet and lifeless, now feels like a home, filled with the sound of laughter, conversation, and the energy of new beginnings. Elliot has fully embraced his role as a mentor and benefactor, not only for Rosie but for other children in need. His philanthropic efforts expand, and the foundation he's established grows into a beacon of hope for many. Clara watches as Elliot's life unfolds in ways she never thought possible. She can't help but feel a deep sense of pride for him, not just for his wealth, but for the man he's become. The transformation is complete, and the man who once pushed everyone away is now the man who opens his heart to others, using his resources and influence for good. One afternoon, as Clara and Rosie walk down the now familiar hallway of the mansion, they're met with a surprising sight. Elliot, standing at the end of the corridor with a broad smile on his face. He's holding a set of keys in his hand, and as they approach, he hands them to Clara. "I've been thinking," he says, "this house should be as much yours as it is mine." Clara stares at the keys, her heart pounding in her chest. She's never expected anything like this gesture of generosity and trust. The house she spent so many hours cleaning, the mansion that once felt so out of reach, is now being offered to her. "Are you sure about this?" she asks softly, her voice filled with disbelief. Elliot nods, his smile warm. "It's time. I've learned a lot about family and what truly matters. This house, it's no longer just a building. It's a place where we can build something meaningful together. For you, for Rosie, and for me." Clara feels a lump in her throat as she accepts the keys, the weight of the moment sinking in. This is more than just a physical space. It's a symbol of the bond they've forged, of the healing that has taken place over the past months. As she looks at Elliot, she sees not just the man who once was isolated and distant, but the man who has opened his heart to those around him. And as they stand there together, Clara knows that their journey is just beginning. They've both learned that it's never too late to change, to embrace love, and to create a family from the most unexpected places. As Clara and Rosie settle into their new lives, the mansion transforms into a place full of warmth and joy. No longer just a symbol of Elliot's success, it becomes a home, a space where all three of them can heal, grow, and build a future. The mansion, once cold and silent, now hums with life. There are family dinners where laughter fills the air, and every corner of the house is touched by the love they share. Elliot has truly found peace in the presence of Clara and Rosie. His once solitary existence is now intertwined with theirs, and he begins to understand the beauty of the family they've created. He takes long walks with Rosie through the gardens, teaching her lessons about life, and Clara often joins them, her heart swelling with gratitude for the transformation they've all undergone. One evening, as they sit together on the balcony, Elliot looks out over the sprawling estate. The sun is setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. He takes a deep breath, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. For the first time in years, he feels whole. "I never thought I could be this happy," Elliot says softly, glancing at Clara and Rosie. "You've given me something I never even knew I needed." The months continue to pass, and with each one, the bond between Clara, Rosie, and Elliot grows stronger. The house becomes a place of not just healing, but hope. Their shared moments, whether it's a simple breakfast, a playful afternoon of board games, or quiet evenings spent reading together, become the foundation of their new family. Elliot continues to pour his efforts into his charitable work, and his foundation flourishes, benefiting countless children who would have otherwise gone without opportunities. He and Clara often collaborate, ensuring that the mission of giving back to others remains at the heart of everything they do. On a particularly warm spring day, Clara and Elliot stand outside, watching Rosie run through the garden, her laughter ringing in the air. Elliot turns to Clara, his expression tender. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he says quietly. Clara nods, a smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, we have." and we've built something beautiful." The sun begins to set as they stand there, hand in hand, knowing that the future is bright. No longer burdened by the weight of the past, they are free to live, love, and embrace the future they've created together.